Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me well, and you can see the presentation as I'm sharing my screen. I am Fragkiskos Filippaios. I'm a professor of international business at the University of Essex, and I'm also the director for the South and East Network for Social Sciences. This is the second out of a total of 5 webinars we will be doing, presenting SENSS, as I said, the South and East Network for Social Sciences. And I will be talking about the way you can apply for funding, studentships, and what we offer at the Doctoral Training Partnership. This is also an opportunity for you to ask questions. There are 2 ways you can ask questions. You can either put your questions in the chat, and as we will go along, I will be picking up those questions and effectively answering them. You might see me looking on my side from time to time. I've got a second screen there with the chat open. Or I'm more than happy for you to come on mic and effectively ask your question directly. As I said, I'm happy to take questions as we go along the webinar. And just to let you know also, we are planning another one of these sessions in a few weeks' time on a Saturday, where it is going to be on a question and answer specifically session. So I'm not going to give a formal presentation like I'm going to do today. It's going to predominantly be a question where people can come on mic or put questions in the chat or ask questions in advance through sending us an email. And I will be spending probably about an hour and a half going through those questions. So if at the end of this webinar, you start thinking about your application, you start kind of putting things together, and suddenly you wake up in the middle of the night, and saying, oh, I forgot to ask that. Don't worry about that. That's not the last opportunity. And also, as I said, we are more than happy to address questions through emails. You will see that I've got towards the end of the presentation the emails of the team, and where I will tell you where to kind of send your question. Usually, if your question has to do with academic matters, I'm the one that picks it up and responds. If it's a question around the system, administrative aspects of the system and things like that, we've got a dedicated address there, which you could always use and kind of send your question in, and the team is very quick in responding. I've been with SENSS for the last 8 years now. I started as the academic lead for the University of Kent, a member of the previous consortium, and then I became in 2019 the deputy director, having responsibility for training and development. And since last December, I've taken on the role of the director for the consortium, looking after our students, looking after our external partners, and effectively managing the competitions, which is the most important thing. I've seen probably by now something in the region of a few hundred applications over the years. And a lot of the things I will be discussing today and a lot of the advice I will be offering today are related to my experience from reviewing those applications, my experience from reading those applications, and what I think I can share with you in a kind of a meaningful way. So the presentation has kind of 4 parts. I'll start a bit saying a few words about the PhD and how the PhD has changed and what we aspire to do at SENSS in terms of the PhD. I'll then introduce the doctoral training partnership and what SENSS is and what SENSS does. And I will then move on to provide you with some practical advice on 2 important things. First of all, finding a supervisor if you haven't found one already. And the second one is around writing a proposal. Now, this is not, the aim of this session is not effectively to be, a full workshop about writing a proposal. But what I'll do there is I'll give you a bit of information on how reviewers approach those proposals. I'll tell you what are the kind of scoring, the evaluation criteria we use as panels, and what we need, what we look to find in a proposal in order to basically decide whether that proposal is worthy of funding or not. So these are the things I will be saying, and I will be covering over the next probably hour and a half. Usually there is time for questions at the end. Uh, it's also quite important to say that this session is being recorded. We have already one of the recordings on the website. We will be recording this session as well. Sometimes the questions that emerge during a session are very different, and therefore we usually find it quite useful to have at least a couple of recordings of sessions on the website. And if you put your question in the chat, I will probably have to read that question out loud just for the purposes of the recording. So if you think, why is he reading questions given that they are in the chat there, I'm doing it as part of the recording. So people that watch the recording later, they can effectively understand what is the question being asked. So that's the kind of outline of today's session. And I'll start with the first kind of question: why do a PhD and what do we try to achieve? And the way I want you to think about this part of the session is, as part of your application for SENSS and as part of your application generally for funding or getting a job, a lot of the time people ask you to write what we call a motivation letter or a statement letter, a personal statement. And the most important question that people tend to ask when they're interviewing, when they're reading an application is, why is this individual willing to go into 3 years of studies or 3.5 or 4 years of studies, pursue a PhD? And obviously in the past, the PhD was kind of a traditional, typical academic qualification that you would get a very kind of linear way into the academia. So students who obtain PhDs, they usually wanted to become professors. Only the best doctoral students would effectively enter the academia, and then you would follow a very linear career path from a PhD to an assistant to an associate to a full professor. And uh, over the last few years, that has changed significantly. And the PhD, or at least the way we see the PhD, is that it's not solely an academic qualification. It's not something that we simply prepare you for a job in the academia, which, by the way, is becoming very, very competitive as a sector. It's quite difficult to get a job in the academia. So what we're doing with the PhD and the training we give you with the PhD is to allow you to develop what we call transferable skills, skills that can be transferred across a range of organizations that have a significant research component. And we place particular emphasis on helping you and supporting you develop not only the ability to conduct research, but also the ability to effectively communicate, engage, and generate impact with that research. So as part of your PhD funding, should you be successful for securing a studentship at SENSS, we have what we call an integrated placement. What is this? It is a period of anything up to 3 months, fully funded. So you will get your stipend, you will get your fees paid, and I'll come back to the things that we cover a bit later on, where you will be working effectively for an external organization, a non-higher education institution, not a university. It could be a business, it could be a charity, it could be segment of the government, local government, national government, and you will be able to develop skills over those 3 months that will allow you to effectively communicate your research and also understand how the outside world is effectively picking up research generated through academic institutions and how that research is then applied into practice. Obviously, before and after that placement, we have a very well developed training program and development program where we take you through ways that you can develop those skills, those engagement skills, and effectively utilize them when it comes to the placement. And then at the end of that placement, there is a piece of self-reflection where you look at those skills, you look at your career options and how you can then move on. So um, our offering from a PhD perspective is not one that simply will give you obviously the tools and the opportunities to enter the academia, but we think much wider than that in order to help you and develop you in a way that you open up career options rather than being very focused. Now, so this is what we do. And then I want you to reflect and think about what you do, why you are here and why you want to pursue the PhD. And usually this is something that you could always put in your personal statement. And as we read hundreds and hundreds of personal statements every year, it's quite important for you to find ways that you stand out from the crowd, if I may say so. Just to put it into perspective, when I mentioned the crowd, usually every year we receive, so last year, to be very specific, which was the first year of this doctoral training partnership, for our student-led competition, we received over 400 applications across the 8 universities. Now, out of those 400 applications, we managed to award, depending on the funding, of course, we managed to award 41. So we're talking about a success rate of around 10% every year. I anticipate, looking at the numbers this year, the system is already open for applications, as you know, from the 1st of October, and it's going to be closing on the 22nd of January. Depending on what I currently see, I can guarantee that probably that number will be significantly higher this year, which means that it is a relatively fierce competition. In that fierce competition, what we expect to see from our students and what we expect from a successful application is an application that stands out. And what is important in terms of standing out is to convince the panel, to convince the university that your purpose for pursuing the PhD, for pursuing this particular topic that you've selected is very valid. So there are three, if I may put it, three kind of big groups of why pursuing a PhD. First of all, is a lot of people do it out of the interest for a career. They pursue an academic career, or as I said, because the PhD is no longer simply an academic qualification, but it's a qualification that prepares you for roles that have a significant research component. People wish to pursue that because they see themselves in those roles. There are also what I would call intellectual purposes. People have personal interests, they draw satisfaction, they wish to contribute to the discipline. It's this, how can I put it? Is this burning desire to effectively find out what's happening with a particular topic, a particular question that you have in mind. And then of course you've got altruistic purposes, which is around solving problems, enabling change, benefiting others. And we see quite a lot of those kind of students coming through the last few years, coming from very diverse backgrounds, that they want to contribute to solving the grand challenges we're actually facing. So these are kind of the three purposes, but they're in no means are kind of conflicting or contradicting each other. Someone can argue that you could have, one, two, or even all three of them in your kind of motivational statement. I've got a very quick question there from Nadia that I can pick it up. And the question is whether this session is only for PhD application and does it include information about master scholarships too? So the way the master and the PhD works is that in our case, we don't separate them. So when you apply for SENSS funding, should you come from an undergraduate degree, we will provide you for master's funding in order, though, to pursue the PhD. So If you're here only for scholarships for a standalone master's, this is not something that the doctoral training partnerships, not only SENSS, but any doctoral training partnership in the UK will offer. You might be better looking at other kind of sources like the Commonwealth Scholarship or the Chevening Scholarship, which do fund standalone masters. For SENSS and for the doctoral training partnership, the masters is simply an additional step that someone has to do before they go towards a PhD. And what we do is we see that as an integrated package that we offer funding for. So we're not going to say, oh, we won't fund your master's, but we will fund your PhD. What we say is, you come from an undergraduate background, you might need a master's. We will fund that master's in order for you to then go and pursue the PhD that you would like to pursue. But the application is for the PhD, not for the standalone master's. And I think, Nadia, I think by that I have covered that question. So um, that's the one thing in terms of purpose of the students and why want to do a PhD. So this is all about your personal statement and your motivation and why you want to do it. And you could think about these three purposes as you present yourselves through that personal statement. You know, you could talk about the topic, you could talk about yourselves, you could talk about your future career and how those three things come together in order to convince someone that you're the right type of candidate to receive funding. I'd like now to spend a few minutes explaining SENSS, and it's very interesting, making sense of SENSS and how we work and how we operate, who we are, and perhaps give you also a sense of the sector as well. So we are what we call a doctoral training partnership. We are funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. This is one of the 7 research councils funded by the UK Research and Innovation, UKRI, you might hear it. The UKRI has 7 councils covering different disciplinary perspectives. So it has, ESRC, which basically is economic and social research. It has the HRC, which is Arts and Humanities Research Council. It has NERC, which is the Natural Environment Research Council. It has BBSRC, which is Biology Research Council. So each one of those councils covers an area. The ESRC covers the area of social sciences. And what the ESRC does is has a big pot of money, which then distributes across the country, funding 15 doctoral training partnerships, as we call them, which are all geographically spread across the UK and Northern Ireland. The vast majority of research-intensive UK universities are part of a doctoral training partnership. So in our case, SENSS consists of 8 universities. There are other doctoral training partnerships in the Southeast. For example, apart from SENSS, there is the Southeast Doctoral Arc, which is University of Kent, Sussex, Surrey, Royal Holloway, Reading, and Kingston. And what you could do is you could apply to as many of those doctoral training partnerships as you wish. There's nobody stopping you to apply for a SENSS studentship or a studentship from CDARC or a studentship from the Cambridge, let's say, DTP. So you can apply to all 3 of them should you wish, and there is nothing kind of preventing you. So my message here is that, yes, we would like to attract as many applications as possible, but don't feel that we are the only kind of doctoral training partnership out there that offers these kind of opportunities. Look at other universities as well. You might be better off, positioned, especially geographically, somewhere else. Also don't put all your eggs in one basket. And should you be successful in both competitions, for example, you could, at the end of the day, select yourselves where you want to study. So if you get an offer letter from SENSS and an offer letter from CDARC, you are the one who can make the choice, say, that's my preferred doctoral training partnership, and this is where I would like to do, what I would like to study. So we receive funding every year. And with that funding, what we do is we manage and award studentships. As I said, last year, the funding we received enabled us to award 41 studentships. On Tuesday, actually, last Tuesday, we held our winter induction with those 41 students starting their PhD journey. And we also offer postdoctoral fellowships, which is something for the future. So we've got a small number of postdoctoral fellowship for students that complete their PhDs and they want to maintain a route into the academia. There is someone, yes, there is a question here which perhaps I can pick it up now. I recently applied for MSc by research at the University of Lincoln, was offered a conditional admission. Can I still apply for SENSS since my aim is to proceed with PhD after the MSc program? The answer is yes, but you would need to think about the PhD now. So, and should you be successful, what's going to happen is we will be able to fund both the MSc by research as well as the PhD. So the fact that you've got the MSc admission, it's absolutely fine. But in order for us to fund something, we would need to see what I would call a PhD proposal. So the funding comes attached to a proposal that you would need to submit. And of course, as you've got already certain links with Lincoln, that would be erupt. I have started my PhD in January, another question, in 24, and applied for this program, but unfortunately was not successful in stage 4. Am I eligible to apply again? Yes, past applications that have not been successful can apply. And if you have already started the PhD program, because there is almost a dual question there, if you have already started your PhD program, you're still eligible to apply as long as you have at least 50% of the time left in your PhD at the point of funding. So in this case, January 2024 with October 2025, it should be absolutely fine. You're in your first year of your PhD, you've started your PhD. It's usually once you get into the second year of the PhD where things get tricky in terms of the eligibility of students. But yes, we would welcome past applications that have been unsuccessful. So this is the kind of funding we get. Overall, across the country, there are about 500 of those postgraduate studentships. And they are, as I said, spread across 50 doctoral training partnership. Ourselves, we are a partnership between 8 institutions. 5 of them are existing institutions from the previous DTP, and 3 are new partners. The institutions there are East Anglia, University of East Anglia in Norwich, Essex, which is the coordinating institution, Goldsmith City, Lincoln, Cranfield, Middlesex, and Roehampton. These are the 8 partners. So in order to apply for SENSS funding, you would need to apply for a PhD to one of those universities. So these are the universities that participate in our structure. You need to apply for an admission for a PhD into those universities with a proposal, and then you would need to apply for SENSS funding. And as I said, last year, we managed to award 40 studentships. And across all of those institutions, there was no institution out of those that didn't manage to get a studentship. All institutions got several studentships, with institutions obviously like East Anglia, Essex, and Goldsmiths being slightly bigger institutions, receiving a bit more studentships than the others. Now, should you be successful, we have a variety of offerings which you could tap into. And one of the things we did with the induction, as I said, that took place on Tuesday, is to present to our new students all these different offerings. But the way I would put it, and I won't go all the bullet points here, the way I would put it is you've got significant opportunities for you to develop yourselves. And it's an amazing opportunity because you've got things like exclusive access to SENSS Campus, which is a fully online suite of activities and training. You've got access to an existing network of about 200 external organizations for placements. Um, there is funding, additional funding for you to go and do overseas visits and field work, attending and presenting at conferences, events, academic publishing, and things like that. I've got someone saying that they can't hear me. Can someone from the ones that you are on screen just indicate that you're all, the rest of you, you can hear me?
We can hear
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's not my my kind of microphone or anything like that. So Ahmad, you probably need to look at your speaker setting. So it is, as I said, one of those kind of once in a lifetime opportunities because you get additional funding on top of your stipend, on top of your getting your fees paid to do significant things like visits, like, as I said, attending conferences, like publishing. And then, of course, all that is under, a virtual learning environment that we have, which we currently revising. So by the time you get to a SENSS and start your studentship, that will all be all up and running, and it will be populated with several training opportunities. Let me just check a couple of questions. Someone is asking, I'm currently pursuing an MSc in economics and public policy at City. I'm working on my dissertation. Uh, I was wondering if I could use the same dissertation to complete my PhD in the same subject area. The answer is yes. You could use that same dissertation. Sometimes we utilize supervisors utilize dissertations as, so if you're writing your dissertation at the moment, or if you're thinking about doing a dissertation later on, you could use the same topic. Obviously, the nature of the PhD proposal is that it has to be very concise. So the dissertation can be, for anything from 8 to 15,000 words. The proposal is not as long as that. So you probably need to summarize it. But yes, the topic can be the same. You could use material from that dissertation to kind of support the proposal. And of course, if the topic is of interest, you need to demonstrate why it is of interest and put it forward as a potential proposal. Um, I've graduated with MSc in psychology. Can I still apply for this? The answer is yes. You can apply with whatever training you want. It doesn't matter. We don't have any kind of eligibility criteria in terms of prior studies. What you just need to demonstrate, which I'll explain a bit more later on, is that you need to demonstrate you're the best person for that particular topic you're proposing. So absolutely fine. If you have an MSc, if you don't have an MSc, what we do is for every application, we think about what we call an individual learning and development journey. So we support you and help you, irrespective of your background, irrespective of your studies, to be able to develop those skills that will allow you to complete the PhD. Next question, is it possible to be awarded SENSS for a part-time PhD while working part-time job in a job approximately 30 hours? If it's possible, would the stipend be half of the amount of stipend for a full-time of the PhD? Yes, the answer is yes. You could do the PhD and you could receive the payment in a part-time. The only thing you need to bear in mind, the minimum full-time equivalent that we can award is 50%. So someone needs to be at least 50% part-time for the PhD. So anything between 50% and 90%, let's say, it is a part-time. It's a doable, it's a feasible scenario, and you can put that into your application. I'm not entirely sure though that the part-time job of 30 hours would allow you to do a PhD at the same time, because that's quite a substantial amount of time, but it's something that you probably need to think when you're putting the application together. Can I apply for the SENSS studentship if I only have a conditional letter of a PhD from a university, as the unconditional letter is only offered after the submission of fee? You, from our perspective, you don't need to have an offer. What you need to have is you need to have applied to the university, because the way the process goes is you apply to that university, you apply to SENSS separately, and then once you've once we receive the applications for SENSS, we basically send those applications back to the institutions, to the 8 institutions, for their initial sifting. So at that point, the institution will check your admission and will check your criteria and your offer and everything like that. And should you have made that application and they feel that they can put you forward, they will nominate you for the next stage of the competition. So from our perspective, what is important is that you have at least applied to that institution before you've applied for SENSS funding. Are you less likely to get funding if you have already started your PhD? No, it's not part of the criteria. Um, to be honest, actually, it's probably more likely to get funding if you have started your PhD, because your application, we would expect those applications to be able to demonstrate slightly higher level of competence because you've started your PhD already. So you might have done certain things and some training which others haven't. What is the first step I must make in order to become eligible for SENSS? Roehampton law student, I would like to embark on a master's degree in human rights in September. So the important bit for me, the first step is to get a supervisor from Roehampton, willing to supervise you for the PhD and work with them to submit a proposal. That for me is always the key starting point. And I'm talking, and I'll talk a bit about the supervisor later on, because the supervisor and the supervisory team is the team that effectively writes a supporting statement for your application, which gets evaluated at the same time as your application. So if you don't have a supervisory team ready, you won't be able to be successful in this competition. Um, there is a question around the 6 themes, which I'll come into a minute, and I'll tell you a bit more about the theme. So I'll pick up that question. And then I'll also pick the question, Benjamin, on the selecting the university when we talk about the supervisor, when I talk about the supervisor. So Hafsa, I'm not entirely sure I get this question, because it's probably related to the admission process at the university you're thinking of applying. So from our perspective at SENSS, there is no requirement for a fee, for an application fee. SENSS doesn't charge anything. The application platform is open to everyone. Now, if the university you're applying to has a fee as part of the admissions process, that's a separate thing. But again, you don't need an unconditional offer to apply for SENSS funding. As I said, what you need is an application to that institution before you apply for SENSS. So whether you hold a conditional or unconditional offer, it's irrelevant as long as you've made that application and you indicate in that application that you wish to apply for SENSS funding. Right. I'll move on, and I'll check again for questions later on. We are a team that manages the consortium. Myself, I'm the director looking after, as I said, the competitions. The person that is looking after and will be looking after your training over the next few years, once you get through the door, is Professor Mark Johnson from Goldsmiths. We've got a manager who has significant expertise on ESRC matters, and that's Felicity Sesnat. We've got a training and development manager who is supporting Mark in your development and looks after your placement, Jenny Wilders. Rachel and Aaron, our coordinator and administrator, are the two important people in the competition when it comes to issues with the application platform or any other administrative issues. And then finance manager is Sarah, who is responsible for ensuring that you get your money paid into your bank account through your universities once you start with your PhD. Right. There is a question around the thematic panel. So let me tell you a bit about the background of these thematic panels and how we came about developing them. So that will probably help you also thinking about where your project fits. In the past, doctoral training partnerships were very siloed in the structures, and what we used to have is we used to have a kind of what we would call pathways, and those pathways were mapped onto social sciences areas. So you would have business and management, economics, sociology, social anthropology, socio-legal studies, you name it. Now, obviously, this created a lot of kind of tension across those different pathways, and it was also a case where we couldn't necessarily see how the different projects would fit in the bigger picture. When you're thinking about a PhD, you're thinking of solving a small part of a puzzle, which belongs to a much bigger picture. So when we did the development for this doctoral training partnership, and we asked ESRC to give us money, I went through a process where I looked at the grand challenges that we're facing. And when I talk about grand challenges, I'm referring to sustainable development goals, the 17 sustainable development goals, with, covering a huge range of subjects. The second area that I looked through was the priorities for the ESRC, what the funder has as priorities, and what do they want to fund, what kind of research they want to see happening. And then the third part in that equation was the research skills, practices, strengths, you can call it anyway, of the 8 partners, of the 8 institutions that formed SENSS. And through that process, we basically developed what you have in front of you, which are the 6 thematic areas. And each one is covering a number of those priorities and a number of those sustainable development goals. And don't get me wrong, but there could be topics here or topics that you might be thinking about who could potentially belong to more than one of those areas. So for example, I can give you one example. There is someone who wants to do something around digital social sciences, which covers, let's say, computational topics. So topics that require computers, computational powers, things like web scraping and things like that, which, you don't do it manually, but you ask an algorithm to do. And then the evaluation of a social sciences question, which is, people's perception on a political leader. And at the same time, you might say that as part of that process, I will develop a very advanced methodology in order to examine my data. So someone could argue that this topic belongs to digital social sciences and advanced methods. And it's there where you need to discuss with your supervisor which is the most important, or the topic or the area that you feel your project fits much better. And then, of course, you do that with your supervisor, you apply to the institution. The institution has its own panel, and that panel will, again, look at your proposal, look at the topics, look at the thematic panels, and they can make recommendations. Should they feel that your project needs to change the thematic panel, they can say, actually, no, it's probably better if we put it under the advanced methods because this is where the main contribution is. So there are still places where you can actually move between one topic and another. And the 6 areas are in no kind of way, as I present them there, in priority. They're equal for us. They play equal importance, and each one of them gets equal chances of attracting a studentship. So don't feel like, oh, sustainability and climate emergency gets more or digital social sciences gets less. Every single one of them can attract several studentships, several scholarships. Now, obviously, the first one is around climate emergency and topics around sustainability. Green finance, for example, can go under number one. The second one is more about health, mental health, social care. The third one is about justice and institutions, and a lot of the projects around the global south can go there. The resolving uncertainty and addressing crisis is an area which is quite wide. It could take several topics underneath, and I've already talked about digital social science and advanced methods. On the website, we have something like this, which what we do is we provide you with basic content, what kind of projects, and this is not a comprehensive list. There are several other topics that you could put there. We're just giving you an indication what kind of content we expect the projects to deal with. There is also the mapping on the Sustainable Development Goals, and there is also the mapping on the ESRC priorities. And perhaps again, when you start talking about your project, yes, Jessica, that's exactly the table has now been transformed to more of a text, but it's exactly the link you have put there. On that website, we give you kind of a sense of where your project might fit. And as I said, it's not an exclusive table. It's not an exclusive list. There could be other topics, other areas, which could very easily fit in one or the other. We just wanted to have a starting point for people that think about SENSS. Freddie's asking about the recording. As I said in the beginning, the recording will be on the website soon, and you can review it whenever you wish. We will put it on our YouTube channel. And yes, it's from the point of registration, the 50%. So if it's 18 months of your full-time course, that's less than 24 months. Usually it's about, you're about the 50%. It might be something that perhaps we need to pick up outside this webinar, and you could look at, you could ask your home institution as well around your eligibility. So this is the thematic areas we have. Now, one thing that I want to highlight is that not all institutions participate in all thematic areas. The vast majority does in most thematic areas, but for example, if applying for a PhD at Cranfield and SENSS funding, you won't be able to apply for a topic that belongs to health, well-being, and social care, or a topic on methods. If you were to think about applying through Lincoln, you would for digital social sciences. Apart from those
Your mic is off right now.
Yeah, I was saying, I think you probably have lost me for a minute there. Something with probably my internet connection. So I'm now back and the recording is there. Okay, so that's kind of where you stand in terms of institutions and thematic panels. Now, 3 steps to make an application. First, as I said, you need to apply for a PhD place at your home institution. That has to happen before the 22nd of January. So you need to have that application. Again, I'm stressing, it's not about an offer, a conditional offer or unconditional offer. It's about ensuring that your application is within the system of that institution you're thinking of applying for funding as well. And you need to do that before the 22nd of January. Why? Because the 22nd of January is the deadline for the SENSS application. Once you've done that, you can then create an HI apply account, which is the platform that we use. And as a third step is you can create gradually your proposal with your supervisor and submit your online application. Now, what usually happens here as well is that once you apply for SENSS, then the institutions take you through a process of interviewing and selection process and everything like that. And an institution can ask us to, what I would call, unlock your proposal in order for you to incorporate any additional feedback from the interview or from the selection panel of that institution before that application moves on to a strictly SENSS selection phase. So the proposal you apply for your PhD place at that institution might be the first version of a proposal that then submitted to SENSS, but in the first instance, that proposal has to be submitted to SENSS as well through the system. But you might get, if the institution decides to put you forward, you might get additional opportunities to further kind of enhance that proposal in the process. So the student-led competition is what we would call the main SENSS competition. It attracts most studentships, so it attracts approximately 30 out of 40. We have what we call ring-fenced awards for pockets of excellence. So Cranfield, Lincoln, and Middlesex are guaranteed a minimum number of studentships every year, and that's because they're new partners in the doctoral training partnership, and we want to give them the opportunity to secure certain studentships. So Cranfield and Middlesex this year, they will be guaranteed 2 studentships out of the competition. Lincoln will be guaranteed 1 studentship from this competition. The deadline for the submission of the proposals for us is 12 o'clock noon Greenwich Mean Time, and I'm stressing that it's not your local time if you're applying for a different time zone, and it's not midnight. It's 12 o'clock, it's noon British time on the 22nd of January 2025. Put that, engrave it in your minds that it's not the midnight and it's not in your local time. It's 12 o'clock noon Greenwich Mean Time. And it has 2 stages. It has the institutional shifting, which is usually in February. So what happens is once you apply for the institution and you apply for SENSS, we take your applications and effectively send them back to what I call the home institution. So your home institution is the institution that effectively you have applied for a PhD. You must have seen East Anglia is on that table, and it is part of the partnership. I can go back. You don't see East Anglia because it's with UEA, University of East Anglia, as we use it. So all institutions participate. Your home institution is the institution that supports your PhD. So just to tell you something here, which is quite important to get a distinction. SENSS as an organization does not award PhDs. We're not an education institution. We are a partnership of 8 academic institutions. So your PhD will be awarded from your home institution, the institution you've made your PhD application. What SENSS does is it takes those applications and gives to those applications funding. So we are responsible for giving you funding. And we have as I said, a robust process to decide which of those applications can get funding. So each institution can submit one candidate per unit of assessment per thematic panel. Institutions like Essex and East Anglia have slightly higher number of candidates they can submit because they participate with more units of assessment. And we also give the opportunity to institutions to submit up to 2 candidates which come from protected characteristics. So one candidate can have any protected characteristic. They could be a carer, it could be a BAME candidate, they could be someone who comes from a underrepresented socioeconomic background, things like that. But the second one needs to definitely be a BAME candidate. And what it does, what happens there once the institutions give us their nominations, those nominations go through what we call a thematic panel shifting. So each thematic panel reviews applications and create ranking lists, and then the higher scoring proposal from those ranking lists are the ones that receive funding. We usually make applications offers in April. So at this year, I think the management board, which makes the final decision, is on the 2nd of April. So soon after, you will know whether you have been successful for funding, and that is for an October 2025 start. Let me just pick a few questions here. If I'm doing PhD in entrepreneurship and tourism, doesn't fall under theme 1 or 6. It's not about the PhD, it's about your topic and your topic, where your topic fits. Is it about topic sustainability and climate emergency or the advanced methods? So the deadline for our application, there is a question around the deadlines for application. The deadline for the SENSS application is the 22nd of January. You will have to have an application made to your preferred institution before the 22nd. So you can't apply for SENSS and then apply for a PhD place. You need to apply for the PhD place and then apply for SENSS. The number of students given funding from each of the 3 institutions. So what I said is Cranfield, Lincoln, and Middlesex are guaranteed Cranfield and Middlesex 2 studentships and Lincoln 1 studentship for next year's entry. So imagine we have a big list with about 80 to 90 students that are eligible for funding. We look at the first Cranfield student, the second Cranfield student, the first Lincoln student, the first Middlesex, and the second Middlesex student. And by default, these students get funding, and irrespective of their position on that final list that goes to the management board. This is what we mean by ring-fenced awards. International students are eligible for funding. I'll come that in a minute. And international students get their full stipend, the full fees paid. Universities won't ask you. The only challenging thing with international students is that when it comes to the final selection stage, the ESRC requires us to apply a quota. And that quota is about 30% of our studentships can go to international students, not more than 30%. So effectively, out of those kind of 30 studentships, you're looking at about 9 to 10 studentships that can be awarded to international students. So you really need to have a very strong application if you're coming from an international background. Mathilde, unit of assessment is effectively the different departments. So for example, in sustainability and climate emergency, you might have business and management departments, business schools participating, you might have schools of development participating. So the university can submit one candidate per unit of assessment, per school that participates in the thematic panel. So for example, if there is a business school and a school of development participating in that thematic panel in the, let's say, justice institutions and social change, the university can submit 2. And larger institutions like Essex, East Anglia, and Goldsmiths have higher numbers of nominations that they can make in those thematic panels.
Sorry
Yeah.
to barge in. So obviously, unit of assessment does it very roughly correspond to departments or?
Yes, the school.
Okay,
Usually it is the school. Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Uh, so the way you could think about it is a school can maximum put one or two applications through this competition. So the institutional shifting can be very, very fierce in a way. So you need to be working with a supervisor in order for you to become eligible effectively for that institution to put you forward. So what we do is we only review applications that are being put forward by the institution. So if I receive, let's say, 400 applications, institutions out of those 400 applications can only put forward 200. And out of those 200, at the next stage, when we review them at SENSS, we only put forward 80. And out of those 80, we can award studentships to around 40. So that's the kind of the funneling and the way the funneling goes. And obviously, some students fail at the first stage, some students fail at the second stage, some students fail at the third stage. And unfortunately, you could even be on that big list, which goes to the management board. If you're not very high, you might not get a studentship. So that's something that you need to be. So you could have a very, very good proposal, but there might be better proposals that receive funding. That's the way the competition, most of those competitions work. And it's not determined by the quality. I have seen over the years excellent proposals, but there are so many of them that effectively you can't give funding to all of them because the amount of money we have is limited. So some additional details here. Uh, how much time you will receive will be determined by what we call a development needs analysis. We will be asking you through your application about your prior training activities, your degrees, your experiences, and everything like that. The minimum you will get is 3.5 years. The maximum is 4.5 years. And you could get anything in between 3.5 and 4.5 years, especially for people that might need some additional training. We've got the options of 3.75, 4, 4.25. So that's how we played. Um, the funding does include an integrated placement. So that is a funded extension. And then on top of that, you could apply for what we call overseas institutional visit, field work, difficult language training. Now, the example I use here is imagine a social anthropology project that requires a lengthy visit in sub-Saharan Africa, and the student has the need to learn the local language. And in that case, the field work, which might be 6 months, it's on top of the 3.5 years. And then if you need to learn the language, the local language, and you need an additional 6 months to learn that, we will be giving you that funded extension as well. So you could get 4.5 years because it's 3.5 years for the PhD, 6 months field work, 6 months difficult language training. And all that is paid effectively. You will be receiving your stipend and you will be getting your fees waiver for that amount of time. And on top of that, you could tap into something which you get, which is called the Research Training Support Grant. And this is about £750 every year, or a maximum of £3,500 for the duration of the award, which is money you could spend towards training, conferences, publications, everything like that. So it's something that it's quite flexible, and yeah, you can utilize it for anything from transcription of interviews to accessing a database that requires a subscription. And it's a process that you decide with your supervisor, and you simply make an application, and you can get that additional funding. So on top of the training that I've mentioned already, it's a relatively generous kind of generous training grant for you, and extensions for you if you want to do additional field work, for example, or additional difficult language training. Now, in terms of the stipend, because I've mentioned the stipend a few times, the stipend at the moment stands just over £20,000 a year. And as I said, on top of that, you will get a full fee waiver. So you won't have to pay any fees, irrespective of whether you're a home or international candidate. Some additional important information. You don't need to have a master's. You can still apply coming straight from an undergraduate degree. If you have professional experience, this is something that you need to discuss with your supervisor. All the studentships are offered on a full-time, part-time basis. All studentships are fully funded, as I said, irrespective of residential status. So before making the application, check your eligibility with your home institution. If you are eligible, apply to your chosen university, discuss your application with your supervisor, and then apply for the SENSS studentship. And check whether your chosen university has their own internal deadline for applying for a postgraduate place in order for you to be able to be eligible for SENSS. Some institutions have a slightly earlier deadline, and that is to allow them to do a pre-selection process before you apply for SENSS funding. I'll come back to how to get a supervisor in a few minutes. Now, in this competition, in the student-led competition, you're only permitted to submit one application. So if someone thinks, oh, I'll apply through Cranfield and apply through Middlesex and apply through Lincoln, you can't do that. You can only apply, you can apply for a PhD to every single one of them, should you wish. But when it comes to the application for SENSS, you need to select with which institution you will be going with. So you can't apply for us through Cranfield, Middlesex, and Lincoln. You need to select whether you're going through Cranfield or Middlesex or Lincoln. You can't have multiple applications. As I said, you can apply to as many DTPs as you like. So you can apply outside SENSS with other DTPs. And also, there is another competition that we run every year, which is called a collaborative application studentship. And this is where supervisors propose topics. We're currently in the process of selecting those topics. Those will be advertised in December on jobs.ac.uk and Find a PhD. There will be pre-selected topics effectively, and you can apply to those topics as many times as you like. So you can apply to as many topics as you like out of those. There will be roughly 8 or 9 projects that we will be advertising, and there's going to be a very similar selection process there where you will need to apply to SENSS for that particular project, and then you will be interviewed by the supervisory panel and the collaborative partner. We will be having a webinar on those once we have them advertised. And as I said, keep an eye out for those. It's going to be probably sometime in December. The deadline for those is not going to be the 22nd of January. Of course, it's going to be much later. It's usually end of February, beginning of March. And as I said, there's going to be a separate webinar. Now, I've got 2 things here around applications with what I would call a slight advantage. So I think I've answered the question around getting an offer from the host institution. No, there's no need to get the offer. What is important is the application to the home institution. Really, really important. The application to the home institution matters because this is where what we will do, as I said, as SENSS, we will push those applications back to the home institution. So if they can't find you in their system, they won't be able to evaluate you. So you don't need to hold the offer as long as you've made your application. Apart from the 3 ring-fenced, the 3 institutions that have what we call ring-fenced applications, there are 2 more areas where we give a slight advantage to some of those applications. And that slight advantage is, again, at the end of the process, at the management board list, not anywhere else. The first one is that we are especially keen to receive applications from those who meet certain criteria that are related to equality, diversity, inclusivity. And these are usually what we would call protected characteristics. So students from minority ethnic backgrounds, students that come from a less affluent area, students with a disability, students who are a carer or have been in care as a child. If you are a home student, and I'm afraid to say to all those international students that these categories don't apply to international students, it is a piece of work that we're currently doing with the SRC to identify how we can translate those characteristics to international students. But at the moment, this is only for home students. If you are a home student and come from one of these backgrounds, uh, you will have the option of indicating this in the equal opportunities form, which is part of the online application process. And for next year, we have ring-fenced 3 of those studentships for candidates that come from BAME backgrounds. So the first top 3 candidates in that management board list that come from a BAME background are guaranteed a studentship effectively. So this is the second area where an application might have a slight advantage. The other area that has a slight advantage is whether your application is specifically dealing with data skills or advanced quantitative methods. And this is something that we have received additional studentships from the ESRC. And there are 6 studentships across these 2 areas every year. We've got a lot of information on the website. So data skills is usually projects that use large data sets, administrative data research kind of data sets, big data methods, innovative analytical methods. And what we do in your application, we ask you to specify whether you feel your application deals with data skills or it's an AQM and advanced quantitative methods. And again, development and use of advanced statistical methods, use of large scale data sets, use of analysis of big data. There is a bit of overlap on those 2. So projects that have links with big data sets and projects that effectively deal with advanced statistical methods are kind of ring-fenced in terms of their studentship. So you could have obviously more than 6 projects being data skills or AQM based. We won't award more than that unless those projects are actually quite high on the management board list. And as I said, on the website, we've got quite a lot of information. There are two specific guidance documents on what constitutes data skills or AQM-based applications. So in essence, pockets of excellence, Lincoln, Cranfield, Middlesex, students with specific backgrounds coming from underrepresented backgrounds, and projects that deal with data skills or advanced quantitative methods have a slight advantage over other applications. Again, that doesn't mean that all other applications don't have a chance. It means that those applications, we award those applications first, and then we look at everything else. Now, 2 more topics I'd like to discuss. And this is again from experience. The first one has to do with a very important part of this process, which is finding a supervisor. And it's important, as I said, because the supervisor and the supervisory team are integral in supporting your application. So once you submit your application, your supervisor, your primary supervisor, gets an email invitation to go onto the system and write their supporting statement. And that supporting statement, together with your application, goes to the panel for evaluation. So the panel will read the supervisor statement, and they will evaluate the statement, and they will evaluate the fit you have between the fit that there is between yourselves, the project, and the supervisor. So it becomes part of the process. So it's quite crucial finding the most appropriate supervisor. Now, there are 2 ways. If you don't know the institution, but you know your topic, what I usually suggest is, look at Google Scholar, put the keywords of your topic and look at people that have published in that area. and then find out where they're working, whether they're in a SENSS, or as I said, they could be in another DTP. And it's one starting point. If of course, like someone else earlier mentioned, that I'm doing my dissertation, I know the institution, I know your topic, then visit the institutional webpage, identify your supervisor, talk to them. If you're part of if they're part of your supervisory team, as you're writing your dissertation, you could express to them saying, look, I have aspirations for a PhD. I'd like to apply for SENSS funding, and work with them to get them to understand your needs and what you want to achieve. Now, from my perspective, one thing which is really, really important in terms of the communication with the supervisor is that first instance of contact. And supervisors tend to receive several emails from people that might want to do a PhD, they want to pursue a PhD with them. And what is again important here is for your email to stand out from the crowd. As I said already about your personal statement, as I will say in a minute about your application. So in your first instance that you're contacting someone, address them properly. Um, you know, use their name, use their title, use, dear Professor XYZ. Don't say, hi, I'd like to pursue a PhD, because that gives them a kind of a sense of not necessarily preparation. Tell them something interesting about yourself and explain your research interest and how you feel your proposal matches their expertise. Um, don't make any extravagant claims that I've read all your publications and I've been impressed, because, and even if you make those claims, make sure that you have done what you claim, and also prepare for face-to-face interviews. Sometimes supervisors invite you for informal discussions beforehand as well. Think of the questions they might ask you. Definitely they will ask you why you want to pursue a PhD. Definitely they will ask you, about your past experience, about your topic, things like that. And as I said, make sure that you tell them something about yourself that makes you stand out from that pile of emails that they have in front of them. Freddie is asking whether there are any limitations related to age. None whatsoever. There are no limitations in terms of the candidate characteristics. So, people apply from all parts of the world, from all ethnicities, from all kind of religions or non-religions, from all ages, from all sexual orientations. There is nothing there to suggest that there is a barrier for an application to SENSS. To the extreme, we are inviting as many diverse applications as possible, and I hope, at least I've seen last year with the first time we ran the themes, that people from diverse backgrounds can see themselves talking to those thematic areas instead of simply talking to a particular discipline. So no restrictions in terms of age. Now, final part of the session, I'll talk a bit about writing a strong proposal, and I'll talk a bit about it from the perspective of the reviewer. So what we expect to see, and in essence, we want to see three things, and I'll spoil the surprise here. The first thing is that you've got a very good idea. It's very important to have a good idea, because that idea needs to stand out from everything else. The second one is that we want to see that you, the person that proposes that idea, has the right skills to deliver on that idea. And the third bit is we expect that you will be supported by an environment, and in that environment, part is obviously the supervisory team, that is appropriate for supporting you and that idea to be delivered. So these are the three parts effectively of the proposal that play the major role. Is it an innovative idea? Is it an idea that, are you the best person to deliver that idea? And are you going to be supported by the supervisor and the local research environment in your home institution to effectively deliver that idea? These are the most important things. This is the way I want to put you into your minds. So it's really important to discuss your research proposal with your supervisor from even from now, the development process. And as I said, what usually happens is in your admission process, you get an interview. What you then do is you get feedback, and institutions ask us to unlock that application so you can incorporate that feedback from the interview. Um, Make sure that you read the SENSS application guidance notes in HI Apply, so you know what to expect. Together with the guidance we've got a document effectively, those guidance notes that tells you exactly what we expect to see in each of those boxes of that application. And the application has two stages: your application form and the supervisor statement. They have to be submitted and completed in sequence. You can't tell your supervisor to put the supporting statement before you submit your application. And so you need to finish with everything. You need to put the application on the system. And then once you hit submit, your supervisor gets an email for their statement. It's really, really important for us. And it's important to clarify that the supervisor statement has to meet the same deadline as the proposal. So you would need to give enough time to your supervisor to submit their supervisor statement. So the 12 noon on the 22nd is for the complete application, your part and the supervisor part. Yes, as I said, the webinar will be recorded and be on the website. So don't rush the night before to hit the submit button, hoping that your supervisor will get the auto email and they will do their bit the next morning. Work with them, tell them, keep them informed about what is the process and where you are in the process and when you will be submitting the application and when they should be expecting that email, in order for them to be able to also prepare their statement. But again, the focus here is the development of the strong research proposal. Now, in terms of the admin bits, what we usually ask is a title, the abstract, and then the proposal itself and a personal statement. And the personal statement is a separate piece of work that you upload, which usually is a maximum 5,000 words. And unfortunately, due to the system, we work with characters. So the research proposal is about, if I remember correctly, up to 4,000 words. And effectively, that's the equivalent of the 10,000 characters. And my advice there, and it is very clear in the guidance note, is that because this is an online application system, put everything you need to put in a Word file and copy paste it kind of on the application. Don't write directly onto the system, because most of the time, if something goes wrong, your internet connection goes down, there is a very, very big risk that you might be losing a lot of work. So write it down on a Word and then copy paste the information on the website. Now, these are characters, as far as I remember, these are characters with spaces, Marta. I think there is a question which is a bit puzzling. Home country is India. Should we be applying for a PhD place in India, or can I apply for UK universities? We will only fund PhDs that are performed in those 8 universities I've mentioned already. So it's not to apply for a PhD anywhere else and then apply for us for funding. We will only support applications that are made in those 8 universities I've mentioned. They are part of SENSS. The 4,000 words don't include references and bibliography. No. So this is something you could put on a separate box. So it's the PhD proposal which is there. Yeah. So this is this list there is the list of all the DTPs. So this covers the 15 DTPs. Thank you very much, Admilson. This is the list of the 15 DTPs and which universities participate into. As I said, we are one of those 15, and you can make applications to any and as many as you wish of those 15 DTPs. So 3 essential ingredients for a good proposal: the issue, what your problem does your research address, the design, strong methodology. We expect to see a very strong methodological approach, and then who will benefit from what your research does. So how your research can be translated to practical applications. Now, proposal is key to your application, should be discussed for your proposed supervisors. High quality, strong potential. We want to see key areas, research problems. We want to see a good coverage of the literature. We also want to see a good coverage of the recent literature. And also what we want to see is how the project will develop over the period of the award. One of the key points the panels are looking at the moment is not only whether the idea is good, whether the methodology is strong, but whether it is actually feasible, the proposal within the time frame. So is it something that you can deliver? And one of the problems you usually have with PhDs is that you either overpromise or underpromise. You need to find the right balance there. Don't promise you will be resolving, the global South's problems, all problems of the global South, but equally, you need to position your problem into the literature and say, this is how I will be advancing the literature to a certain degree. You don't need to secure a placement at this place. At this point, we will be helping you with the placement, and the marketing plan is not for this competition. Once you start looking into this specific competition, you will see that it's not a requirement of the documents you need to upload. So don't create a negative impression by having typos, by having lack of clarity, or using extreme jargon, or a brief proposal with long reference section. Also, what is quite important to highlight is that when your proposal gets to the thematic panels, those thematic panels will consist of people that might not direct experts in the area of your PhD. So you will need to be able to talk to them and explain to them what your proposal is all about and how your proposal is being developed. So we would expect to see a basic description, the background, which is the literature, and from that literature, the key research questions you want to address. What is the method? What is your timeline? And what is your impact? How that research translates to the outside world. So these are the criteria we're using. Evidence of quality and feasibility takes 40%. Interdisciplinarity. Ideally, your proposal will be interdisciplinary in nature, given that it talks to a specific theme. Evidence that you are well prepared for your research and future career, and evidence of the quality of the local environment, including the supervisory expertise. As you will see, the most important criterion is the quality and feasibility of the proposal. And this is kind of the definition of each one of them. We would expect the research question to be clearly outlined, to look at the existing literature, to demonstrate that the data you need to address the questions is there, or you have access to that data, things like that, and of course, it's quite important to have a strong proposal, as I said, a clear idea, and to be able to communicate how you will address that idea and in which time frame you will do it. Now, the quality and feasibility is based on two things. First of all, on your proposed project, but also on the information supplied by your proposed primary supervisor. And what we will be looking for is your ability to design and conduct a research project, a research plan, so the way you will deliver that over the years, and also where you are in that current field and how you can push that current field forward. In simple terms, what we would like you to do is innovate. Make sure your idea stands out. Reviewers will probably read at least 30 applications, so you need to remember that your idea needs to stick with them and get you out of that pile of applications. Support, ensure that you have adequately covered the literature, with key and up-to-date references. The issue of under and over promise, and also the methodology, and sometimes the contingency plan. What if you plan something and doesn't work out? You don't necessarily need to have a plan there, contingency plan, but you just need to demonstrate that you have an awareness of things that could go wrong in the process of the PhD. So, the second one is about you, key area, how your previous experience, and when we talk about previous experience, is not only about academic, it can be professional, it could be also life experience. Imagine someone with a family, kids, and everything like that. Their time management usually is quite good. And that's something, it's a skill that it's quite important for a PhD. And also, there it's your supervisor's evaluation of your suitability for the research project. So how have you performed at previous studies? Have you got any professional experience? And also how your program will contribute to your long-term career aims. So in essence, it does not matter only if you have a strong proposal, but you need to demonstrate that you are the most appropriate person to take it forward. You've got the right skills, motives, the right drive, all these things are there. And the panel feels that the panel needs to get confidence that should they hand you that studentship, you won't kind of fail. That's the most important thing you need to bear in mind. And then the last one is around the quality of the local environment. And it will be based on the supervisor's research areas. It will be based on the individual roles and your training needs and everything like that. So you don't need only an excellent proposal, but that you're also the best person, but that you will have a team supporting you that has expertise and experience, and they can help you develop over the years. Your personal statement is something that I've already mentioned a few times. Tell us about yourselves, why you want to study, discuss why SENSS, what has attracted you to us, and also demonstrate that you're ready for postgraduate life. We have a series of pieces of information on the website that can help you address some of those questions around applying for funding, looking for supervisors. The two emails there are my email for academic inquiries and the admin for any administrative matters. I'll check now whether there are any other questions on the chat, and then the assessment criteria are on the guidance, and there is also a very big mapping of the assessment criteria in terms of the scores. So what is a poor proposal and an excellent proposal? So all that is in the guidance notes. Someone's asking, I have tried filling the application several times since the 10th of October. Every time I logged out after saving, when I went back, I lost information. So if you email, and I'll go back, if you email admin@senss-ttp.ac.uk with your name and what happens, they will pick it up with the HI apply, because you shouldn't be losing information every time you log out. There must be something with the system there. I'm still a postgraduate student. My dissertation is scheduled for the third semester, falls after the deadline of June 22nd. Well, there is no requirement that you have completed your dissertation for the application. What I said earlier is that sometimes the topic of the dissertation might be a topic that you could also use for your PhD, but there's nothing to suggest that you need to have completed the dissertation before making an application. Can anyone help to check if the appropriate application is being filled in? I think that's something that the admin team can do. Benjamin is asking whether the research topic should be country specific. It could be country specific. It doesn't have to be country specific. Bear in mind though that if you have a project which is a country specific project, what might be quite useful is in the introduction to put that country into the context and think about how that country can help us understand what happens for the wider world. So, you know, that generalization of the topic is quite important. But you could then follow through and say, okay, I'm going to do it on Sri Lanka, I'm going to do it on Colombia. It doesn't have to be a cross-country topic. Yes, Gaji, it would be useful to have a project timeline as part of the research proposal because that gives us confidence that you have thought about the different steps for that proposal. Joseph, you can apply to different universities, but you cannot apply multiple times for SENSS funding. So you could make a PhD application to as many universities as you like, but when it comes to the SENSS application, you can only select one of those universities to put as your home institution. Freddie, I put the list. The East Anglia is UEA, as Helen mentions there. My portal shows an unknown program listed. How do I get it removed? I think that's something you could ask the admin team to do. I can come back to the personal statement slide. Yes, so I'll say a few words. You need to demonstrate effectively why you want to do the PhD, first of all, and why SENSS. You know, it's effectively a statement that helps you justify the selections you've made throughout this process. You know, why SENSS, why that university, why that department, and why that topic. And you could also tell us, you know, how you see this opportunity as an opportunity that will help you shape your career, help you shape your training and development, and, you know, why you're passionate about this topic and why you want to pursue. Going back to the three kind of purposes of the students, you know, you do it for a career, you do it because you've got the intellectual kind of stimulation, but also you do it because you want to resolve a bigger issue. So you could reflect on those things in your personal statement. The slides and the recording will be available. So that's there. I can put again the slide with the emails for you to note down if you want. All the emails are on the website as well, so you could visit the website. For SENSS, we don't require letters of recommendation. The university you're applying to might be asking you for a letter of recommendation for the SENSS application, and throughout this process we don't use letters of recommendation. We feel that they can bias occasionally reviewers, so we've made a decision not to actually ask for letters of recommendation as part of the SENSS application, but that doesn't mean that your home institution might not be asking you one. I think that's all from me at the moment. We've gone 5 minutes over time. It's always challenging, and you know, sometimes the last few slides can feel a bit rushed. So I apologize if that was the case for some of you. My key message before I leave you is, as I said, there are going to be other webinars you can attend. There's going to be one with specific questions and answers. Look on the website for the dates and the registration lists for those. And the other key message is that we as SENSS team are here to support you throughout the process, resolve any issues that you might have, and kind of get you through the difficult parts of the process and help you address any kind of technical issues you might be facing. And of course, from my perspective, offer advice on anything you want related to academic inquiries. Sometimes people email me with questions around, identifying supervisors. I help to the best of my knowledge. Obviously, I don't know every single individual that works in those 8 universities. I wish I did, but I know the areas of expertise in those different institutions, and I can point you towards the right direction should you wish to find supervisors, and if you haven't done that already. Uh, I'm looking at the list. Yes, if you apply for an institution, if you apply for a PhD, most institutions will ask you whether your application, I'm referring to Gargi's question about mentioning the SENSS fellowship in the letter of for the institution in the application. Most institutions will ask you whether you're also applying for funding through that, so they know that that application is also going to be appearing as part of the SENSS selection process. So yes, mention that, and you could also mention it in your personal statement to that institution that, look, I'm keen to actually get additional funding and apply for funding, so I will be applying for a SENSS studentship. So at least the institution knows, what your aim is with that application. I can see the questions winding down and more about thanking me. So I'd like to thank you very much. Recording should be there in the next couple of days. It's a process where I need to get it out of Zoom and then put it on our YouTube channel, and from that point it goes onto the website. So if it's not tomorrow, it will be probably early next week on Monday. The recording will be there. As I said, there is already one recording from a previous session we delivered, and every single session we will be doing, we will be updating with the recording. The guidance is on the website. The application platform is open. We opened it on the 1st of October. So start putting that information, create your profile, work with the supervisor to get the proposal to a very high quality, very high standard. And from my side, the only thing I want to wish you is good luck with your application, and looking forward to receiving it in the foreseeable future. Thank you very much.